Imagine you're a kid in the 2000s, you're watching Star Wars Episode 1, 2, and 3, and you don't know that there are more Star Wars movies. And all of a sudden, you realize that there's Episode 4, 5, and 6. But you don't know that they came before Episode 1, 2, and 3. And when you watch it for the first time, you're like, what is this piece of shit? Why does it look so old? Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope was written and directed by George Lucas. It was originally called Star Wars. It came out in 1977, and it was probably the most impactful movie when it's about blockbusters, and probably the most revolutionary one. Every movie that you're watching nowadays that is about entertainment, action, and witty characters is because of Star Wars. Just with the opening shot alone, you're watching a master of storytelling delivering you an amazing experience right from the get-go, an epic experience. The opening shot of Star Wars for me defines the entire movie. Simple and just powerful. It's the best opening shot in cinema history in my opinion. The little ship just coming from the superior edge of the screen to the center, and the ship that is chasing it just becoming bigger and bigger as it's advancing. And then you realize, okay, I know who are the little guys and I know who are the big guys who have the superior hand here. It's masterful. But what I love about it is how epic it feels. I adore that. I adore that about this movie. This is a very simple movie, not just in direction, but also in story. It's a very simple story. It's just a young farmer who wants to go and save a princess, and there's also these plans of the Death Star, which is the castle that has her captured. It's that simple. And no, Star Wars I don't think is science fiction. I think it's fantasy. But obviously it feels like science fiction because the world is very logical here, because of the backstory that is commented by characters, and sometimes it's not that clear. It makes you feel like you just got into this world and you're hearing all these comments and you're like, I don't know what you're saying, but I believe that this is happening in this world. I don't know exactly what is happening, but I believe that there's a culture here, that there's a backstory here. And that's what is lovely about the world that Lucas created with this movie. This movie also opens with C-3PO and R2-D2 as the main characters. They land on Tatooine, and this is a very exciting movie. But honestly, the first minutes in Tatooine, they're very slow. Like, the shots linger for a lot. And I love how much Lucas trusts the audience. Yeah, back in 77, people were more patient. But for today's standards, I was watching it with a friend who has never seen Star Wars. And he was entertained right off the get-go. Because the movie feels like it's building to something very entertaining and very interesting with the creatures and even the planet. There are small details in the production design that keeps you hooked. And yeah, then we are presented to Luke Skywalker, one of the best protagonists in cinema history. 3PO and R2-D2 are like the protagonists until the sunset scene. Then is when you realize, okay, this is the guy who I should feel something for. Because you're watching him wanting to leave and seeing the sunset that he's like, okay, there's where I want to go. I want to go beyond here. But like, one song would have been enough. And this is something that I love about Lucas. He was like, I want people to sympathize as much as they can with Luke. How I'm going to do it? I'm going to put 2 songs. Because everyone can go to the balcony or to the beach to watch a sunset with 1 song. So he was like, I'm going to put 2 songs. So people feel like, oh my god, I'm watching something wonderful. And I'm feeling what the character is feeling, that he can't leave this place. We meet Obi-Wan Kenobi that becomes an even more complex character as we watch the prequels, but he presents us the Force. I'm gonna talk a little bit more about the Force in my next review, in Empire Strikes Back review, because I think it's one of the most beautiful things presented in film, because the Force is kind of real. It's basically energy. Energy exists in the universe. Obviously, we cannot leave stuff, but it's something that everyone can connect with. An impactful moment, a very disturbing moment in Star Wars is really in this film, in the first film. And it's when Luke comes back to his home and is just completely destroyed. And there, and he's and he finds his uncles burned alive outside his home, and it's just like, oh my god. But his reaction is so good. It just propels him in this story, because he's like, oh my god, this is horrible, but he's like, I'm angry, I have to do something about it. And that's when the movie becomes just infinitely even more interesting. That's how this movie feels like. It feels like everything that is presented is making the movie even more interesting and more interesting and more emotional. And it's just so exciting. It's a very exciting movie. Han Solo is presented in the Mos Eisley Cantina, and the music is incredible. The scene is incredible. And again, the creatures, all that stuff. Again, it becomes bigger, and Han Solo is the most badass character ever. And you're like, okay, I'm getting along with these people that I just met like a few minutes ago, and you feel like you're watching incredible characters already, characters that you have known your whole life. And trust me, guys, trust me, that wasn't for me back when I watched the movie for the first time. Like, I didn't know Han Solo. I knew Anakin Skywalker, I knew Obi-Wan because of the prequels. But then when I watched episode 4, I was like, okay, I just met this guy, and I connect with him. I understand him, and he's so cool. But my favorite moment of this movie, and I don't know why, I know why, I just think that people are gonna be like, really, that's your favorite moment, is when Luke says that TIE fighter is heading towards that moon, and Obi-Wan is like, that's no moon, that's a space station. And then Han Solo is like, it's too big to be a space station. And Han Solo, the most arrogant and cocky character in Star Wars, is like, okay, I think you're right. Oh my god. And just the music and the imagery. I mean, the music is called Inner City for one reason. Feels huge. It feels like, okay, these characters have no way out of here. This is my favorite sequence in the entire movie.
Reward would be...
What?
well, more wealth than you can imagine.
I don't know. I can imagine quite a bit.
It's very funny. There's a lot of funny moments, but what I love the most is how much is about sneaking around, like Han Solo says. It's not about action sequence. Yeah, there are a lot of action, there's a lot of shooting and stuff, but it's mostly about sneaking around and just playing stormtroopers and all that shit.
Too short for a stormtrooper?
Huh?
And it's just so entertaining, the banter in between Luke, Han, and Leia. Because it feels like these characters are like this in this situation, and that makes it funny. And that's something that a lot of blockbusters have copied out of this movie horribly. A lot of blockbusters today feel like you're watching jokes. They're forcing you to laugh in scenes because they want you to not get bored, and they want you to feel like you're watching a very entertaining movie. But when you watch Star Wars, it doesn't feel like jokes, it feels like funny moments. What's the difference? Jokes are characters being forced to say something funny to make people laugh. Funny moments for me in movies is when different characters are interacting with one another very organically, and because of the situation and because of who they are, it's funny. That's so lovely about this sequence. But when you're in a trash compactor, you really feel that these characters might die, and it feels even horrifying because you're imagining how these people are gonna be squashed in this thing, and it's very tense. I love that. I love that. That's what I need with movies. Yeah, be funny. Yeah, have characters interacting with one another and be very entertaining, but also make me feel that these guys might die. This whole Death Star sequence feels like the second act in the movie.
Somebody get this big walking carpet out of my way.
The third act doesn't have that much creepy dialogue. It's more grounded. The whole Death Star stuff with Luke being in the X-Wing and just the way that all the pilots speak to one another feels very grounded. And is very exciting because the threat is real. You know what the Death Star can do with one planet, which is like when I watched that as a kid, even though the effects weren't as good as episode 1, 2, and 3 for myself when I watched the movie as a kid. When I saw that planet blowing up, I was like, oh my god, this thing is powerful. So when you're in the third act with this big thing, it feels like this big threat. And obviously, yeah, the Death Star is gonna destroy the Rebel base in 15 minutes or something, I don't remember. This whole sequence feels real in that aspect. But I'm gonna say something Star Wars Original Trilogy fans don't want to recognize, is that the special effects don't hold up all that much. It's the truth. This movie came out in 77, and the other two came out in the 80s. It's natural that special effects don't hold up all that much today. That's fine. It's fine. I mean, but it's the truth. A lot of them don't hold up all that much. Some are still fantastic and you feel that you're watching something realistic. But some moments in the Death Star sequence just don't hold up all that much. But when I was watching it with a friend, I was thinking, do I buy that Luke is in that X-Wing above this Death Star? Yeah. Now, quickly, my thoughts in the special edition changes. A lot of them I like. A lot of them improve special effects. Some of them are unnecessary and some of them are horrible. I don't think everything is shit. I think a lot of it really improves the special effects. Really, that's the thing that the special edition does better than the original version, and is that it does improve some special effects, but some are worse because you integrate CGI. It just feels like another movie because the movie doesn't have that much CGI. There wasn't CGI in '77 as the one that we know today. So like sometimes it feels weird. That's what I think about the special editions of these movies in a nutshell. But there are two moments in this Death Star sequence that is masterful, by the way. Like when it's about the editing, when it's about the writing and the directing, is masterful. And there's a lot of stories behind the editing of Star Wars because a lot of things went horribly. I mean, like, the movie was very cheap and Lucas revolutionized cinema with low budget. A lot of changes went in that editing, and supposedly one of the biggest ones is the fact that in the original cut, the Death Star was not supposed to destroy the Rebel base. It was just like the Rebels going above the Death Star into the Death Star and destroying it without any threat. But then the editors incorporated some voiceover and images to recontextualize this sequence. And now it's about the threat of the Death Star destroying the Rebel base. And the Rebels going into the Death Star to destroy it before they destroy them. What's funny about this is when you realize how was the original draft of the movie, you think that these are the dumbest people in the planet making a movie. But when you see how they fixed it, you know that they're geniuses. The hand Ex Machina moment has been copied a lot in movies, but in this one it works a lot because when he refuses Luke's request to join him in the battle, he's like,
Hey, Luke. May the Force be with you.
you know in his face, okay, this guy might change his mind later on, and he does. So when he comes back, you're like, fuck yes, and you believe it. The other moment is obviously Luke just showing off the aiming system and just trusting the Force. That's another thing that has been copied a lot in movies. And the movie ends with the award ceremony. Our heroes are now officially heroes, recognized by the galaxy. And that's it. That's Star Wars. A very simple movie. I envy anyone who watched that movie when it came out in '77. I just can't imagine the emotion seeing the Death Star exploding, that it feels like Tarkin's head is exploding, because right before that shot of the Death Star blowing up, we have another circular shape with Tarkin's head, and then the other cut is another circular shape that is the Death Star exploding. It's genius. It's a genius movie. It's one of the best movies ever made. It's probably my favorite Star Wars movie, and I think it's a masterpiece in that aspect. In innovation, in revolution for the industry. It's just an entertaining movie that it's a feel-good movie. You know, it's a feel-good movie, and it's something that a lot of Star Wars movies don't feel like anymore. They feel very dramatic, which is cool, but this one has that going for it, and I think it's a very special movie that I will never forget the first time that I really enjoyed it, because I really didn't enjoy it all that much until I was 15. When I was 15, I was like, okay, this is incredible. I adore it. I'm gonna give the original Star Wars a 10 out of 10. Through the months of April and May, I'm going to review every single Star Wars movie. I'm going to exclude Rogue One and Solo. I just want to review all those 9 movies. I'm also going to be making some analysis video and one surprise video towards the end of this series. So look forward to that, guys, and thank you for watching, like always, and take care of your time.